wildfire situation? Has things gotten any better or worse overnight?
Well, the situation has not changed dramatically overnight. We're still seeing some rain down in Nova Scotia, which is proving very helpful, particularly in the fire around Halifax. The Barrington Lake fire remains a challenge for them there, but the rain is certainly helping. And we believe now that they have adequate resources, additional help has arrived to assist them. The Canadian Armed Forces, for example, now have trained 150 people that are deployable in the area. In Quebec, the situation remains quite concerning, and as we see even here this morning in Ottawa, the smoke from those fires is now reaching right across Quebec and Ontario and impacting air quality for a lot of people. And I would take the opportunity to just caution people, particularly seniors and people with small children, that the smoke can cause breathing problems and people should take appropriate precautions and perhaps, if it's possible, simply stay indoors.
So you can have enough physical resources. I know we've talked about people and bringing in international firefighters, but physical resources for this summer, that bleak projection yesterday that was painted, are there enough water bombers to go across the country and those physical things needed to fight fires?
Yes, ma'am. One of the things that the Canadian Interagency Firefighter Service does on behalf of the provinces, territories, and the federal government is it coordinates the movement of people, equipment, and airplanes. Water bombers, for example. And so, I'm in regular contact with the agency. They've been doing some really outstanding work in coordinating the delivery of people, equipment, and water bombers to different parts of the country. We have a number of those assets available to us here in Canada, but we can also draw upon air assets, for example, in other countries. There are 6 water bombers currently in Nova Scotia, for example, that came from Montana. And so one of the things the agency does is coordinate the movement. Yesterday, the smoke and rain conditions made it impossible to water bomb in Nova Scotia, so those planes were redeployed in Quebec for the day. And so that type of efficient use of limited equipment is very important in our firefighting efforts.
There was a lot of chatter last night in the emergency debate about whether Canada needs dedicated emergency response firefighting force, whether that's for the military or not. I mean, it took several days to train soldiers to fight the fires in Nova Scotia, and it seems like by the time they were trained, things were starting to get better. Do you not need to do more on that front?
Certainly. We've already said we're training significantly 1,000 new firefighters just this year. There's investments being made through Canada. We're also working with Indigenous services to train several hundred additional Indigenous firefighters for their communities. But it's important to recognize that the initial response to wildfire is a provincial responsibility. The provinces actually have very robust responses to these things. They have trained firefighters, they have resources, and they manage this year after year very efficiently. There's also, as I've already mentioned through CIFC, a strong collaboration between provinces and internationally to move resources across the country. And when the situation becomes extremely difficult, as we've seen in Nova Scotia, Quebec, and Alberta most recently, when they need additional resources, a request for assistance is made to the federal government, and then we deploy the resources that we have available to them. Some of that obviously forms in the form of Canadian Armed Forces, and one of the important mandates of the Canadian Armed Forces is being available for domestic response.
So should they not all be trained in firefighting?
Well, we are training a great number of them already trained as level 1 firefighters, but the type of conditions that they were meeting in Nova Scotia and in Quebec required additional training to bring their level of training up, and so we've been providing that training. But it's not just the Canadian Armed Forces that's there in response. Transport Canada, NRCan, Parks Canada, our environmental ECCC is also very much engaged with the provinces through our Government Operations Centre. And it's a very, very strong collaboration. It works very, very well.
So you don't think we need a separate, dedicated national fire?
I think we need to always be thinking about how we can improve our response and to be quicker and more agile in response to these things. It means investing in additional firefighters, investing in additional equipment, and working very closely with the provinces and territories to make sure that we have the resources when we need them, where we need them, with the appropriate skills and equipment to do the job.
What contingency plans are you working on? Yesterday, we heard the Prime Minister talk about bringing in more international firefighters, but what haven't we heard that you're talking about behind the scenes?
Well, certainly we're looking at acquiring access to additional equipment and water bombers. If they are required, we have to know where they are and how we can get access to them very quickly. There is some additional training that's taking place over the course of this summer. We're also within the federal government looking at a number of things, including the Federal Emergency Response Plan, which we refer to as FERP. That's been in place now for over a decade, and it really requires, in light of the increased frequency and severity of these weather-related events, we're starting to see these things occurring more frequently and on a far greater scale. And so we are reviewing the federal emergency response. It includes strategic stockpiles. it's a whole of government effort to look at all of the things we can do to help in any emergency, and that of course can include wildfire and flood, but it also includes such things as cyber attacks, pandemic most recently, other health-related events. All of those things the federal government is working on ensuring that our response is appropriate and robust to help the provinces when they need our help.
Federal officials mentioned that the Canadian forces are there really as a backup in some areas like Nova Scotia that are doing, quote, the mop-up, the cleanup, just some basic firefighting duties. What exactly are the Canadian forces doing? Not the firefighters, but the ones that were just trained.
Far better to ask them because they have people with different skills and different equipment. One of the things we saw, and I went and visited them in Alberta at Edmonton, the Canadian Armed Forces there were actually being deployed not in the front line of the firefight, but behind it, because we see that there's hotspots throughout the area that has been burned. And so one of the things that happens in what we call ground fires, those fires can actually smolder underneath the ground. And so one of the things the Canadian Armed Forces has been assisting the provinces is going into those areas, digging those out, putting out those hotspots, and making sure that it doesn't flare up again.
Could you talk to us about
Don't yell at me.
How concerned are you with the air quality in the National Capital Region?
This summer, could we have so many wildfires that it exceeds the capacity of the government to intervene?
Right now, based on the projections and of existing conditions and the future weather projections, plus our consultation with the provinces and territories, we believe that we will have adequate resources to respond to what may occur, but we are always looking to how to improve that response and how to improve that capability. We're making investments in training, as I've already mentioned, in acquisition of new equipment. It's an ongoing collaboration between ourselves and the provinces. As I've mentioned earlier, the provinces are the primary first response. It's the local, in Halifax, it was the regional fire department was the first response to the Halifax fire. And we work very closely with the provinces. Our officials are in daily, sometimes hourly collaboration and communication. And when the situation exceeds the provincial ability to respond, then the provinces all know that they have the ability. Like I'm in regular contact with my political counterparts, but our senior officials are also in regular contact when there is a need for the federal government to provide additional resources or to assist in the collaboration between provinces or even other countries. We're always there to help.
Could you talk to us about the air quality, including on Parliament Hill?
Yeah, well, certainly. I think we all noticed, even coming into work this morning, you could strongly smell the smoke and see it in the air, and we're even seeing dust and ash starting to accumulate on surfaces, and so it is a little concerning. I'm not the one to give health advice, but I think obviously for seniors, for small children, for people who might otherwise have breathing problems, they have to take precautions, perhaps stay inside today. It's probably not the best day for outdoor activity, and I've noticed even here in the city of Ottawa, a number of outdoor activities are being canceled, and I think that's prudent. And as well, for those who might have access to particulate masks, it might be a very good idea to use them today, but that's up to their individual choice. But we are concerned about air quality. We've also seen it's affecting, obviously, Ottawa and the City of Toronto, but right across Quebec and Ontario. The smoke is a significant concern, as it was in Calgary and Winnipeg for the Alberta fires. And so I think people have to be aware that the impact of these wildfires is not simply in those communities that are near the flames, but the smoke can be carried into their communities. There are impacts on all Canadians, and I think that's why all Canadians are concerned.
Minister, you mentioned masks. Is there going to be any recommendation from the federal government to wear masks? Because this wildfire smoke, long-term, could kill people. It's like smoking cigarettes.
And again, I'll have a conversation with the Public Health Agency, but right now, I think for those who know that they have breathing difficulties and could be challenged by the smoke, they should take precautions. And certainly it would be prudent to stay inside, for example, and if they do have to go outside, to take the appropriate precautions, which can include the use of a particulate mask.
Will you be issuing like a formal
And again, I'll have a conversation with the Public Health Agency. That's not my area of expertise.
What are people inundating your email box right now saying from the public?
Well, you know, from the public, I think the public, one of the things that I've been doing is, at the very outset of these fires, certainly in Alberta and Saskatchewan, Northwest Territories, I reached out to all the members of Parliament representing those communities. I've given them daily updates, and even hourly updates on what's been taking place in their jurisdiction, and now we've continued that in Ontario, Quebec, in Saskatchewan, in Nova Scotia, and in New Brunswick to provide that information, because I think a lot of people will contact their local member of Parliament, and I want to make sure they have the information. And also for the ones that are most impacted by those fires, I've given them my personal phone number, and if they have any issues that require an immediate response, or they have a question that requires an answer immediately, then they can contact me. So communication with the public is very important. We're also doing that through our own Public Safety Canada, and there are a number of other alerts and messaging going out, but we've been working very closely. Even last night I had an opportunity for the second time to brief the opposition party leaders on what's been going on, because right now this is really, quite sincerely, a whole of government response that is required here. It's not a partisan issue. It requires complete collaboration, and collaboration requires a free flow of information.
Will you be keeping the emergency incident response team, like what we saw during COVID, like regular meetings?
Right now, the situation is being managed within existing resources, and it really is between the Government Operations Center here in Ottawa and all of their provincial counterparts, provincial emergency operations centers right across the country. That's working very well. We also have another table that we've set called the Senior Officials Responsible for Emergency Management, which includes at the deputy minister level, federal deputy ministers and their provincial counterparts that work very, very closely together. I believe right now that there is no significant challenge or problem with communication between the various departments and between the federal government and our provincial and territorial partners, but we'll continue to monitor the situation and we'll respond as we were required to do. Thank you all very much.
Okay, thanks, Minister.
Hi, everybody. So, first and foremost, I would like to express my gratitude to all those that have been involved in fighting the wildfires across the country. And in particular, I would like to thank many countries who have sent firefighters, particularly the US, Mexico, South Africa, and France. And of course, my thoughts are with all those affected in different communities across the country, including my beautiful province of Quebec, of course, and also those living far from wildfires, but that are in different urban centers, such as here right now, where we can bear the effects also of wildfires. Donc, je vais le dire en français et je vais prendre vos questions après. Donc, j'aimerais remercier tous ceux et celles qui sont impliqués dans le fait d'éteindre les feux de forêt un petit peu partout à travers le pays, particulièrement au Québec. Il y a plusieurs pays aussi qui ont répondu à l'appel et qui nous ont envoyé des pompiers. Je tiens à les remercier, particulièrement les États-Unis, particulièrement également le Mexique, l'Afrique du Sud et la France. Donc, merci. Merci aussi à tous ceux et celles qui sont impliqués à travers les communautés pour aider les gens à se replacer. Et au final, je voulais aussi dire que mes pensées sont avec tous ceux et celles qui sont affectés par les feux de forêt, que ce soit bien entendu dans les différentes villes et villages, notamment en Abitibi ou un peu partout en Nouvelle-Écosse et en Alberta, mais aussi dans les milieux urbains, dans les villes. On sait présentement à Ottawa, à Montréal, présentement, on vit les impacts des incendies de forêt.
Souhaitez-vous recevoir davantage de pompiers forestiers d'étrangers ou est-ce que c'est suffisant chez nous?
Mais à date, on voit à quel point il y a une belle générosité. Parce que c'est évidemment de façon spontanée que les pompiers ont été envoyés par ces différents pays. Des pays qu'on est habitué de travailler avec eux, notamment bien entendu les États-Unis, aussi le Mexique, mais aussi la France et l'Afrique du Sud, c'était de bonnes nouvelles. Alors, je voulais le dire aux Canadiens. Et puis, nous, lorsqu'il y a des incendies de forêt ailleurs dans le monde, on répond présent, on envoie aussi nos pompiers. Donc, ça démontre, c'est une autre façon de faire un peu de la diplomatie, particulièrement au moment où les changements climatiques ont un impact un peu partout à travers le monde.
Ce n'est pas l'Australie ou la Nouvelle-Zélande qui peut aussi...
Oui, l'Australie, oui, je m'excuse. C'est une omission involontaire de ma part. Yes.
In Ukraine, what's your reaction?
Well, first and foremost, we see that this is another reckless action by Russia. It jeopardized thousands of lives and livelihoods. And of course, we will always make sure that Russia is held accountable and will seek justice for their reckless actions.
How are you going to hold them accountable?
Well, we've said it many times, first and foremost, by supporting Ukrainians for their fight for freedom and also our freedom, and before the International Court of Justice and different tribunals. We're supporting also a special tribunal on this crime of aggression.
President Zelensky recently at the G7 talked about how Canada was helping with something new with the demining project. I know what you've already announced, but
Yes.
what new is Canada helping with on that front?
Well, because of the Ottawa Treaty on banning landmines, we've developed over the years many expertise, a lot of expertise when it comes to demining. And so we're working to really train Ukrainians themselves to be able to have safe spaces in their own areas, including Kyiv, including across the country. And we'll have more to say in the coming weeks about that.
Alors, je voulais prendre un petit instant pour souligner le fait que ce que tout le monde sait déjà, c'est que la qualité de l'air est gravement impacté par les feux de forêt qu'on voit partout au Canada et au Québec en particulier. Le message principal, c'est que les gens qui sont particulièrement impactés par cette mauvaise qualité de l'air, c'est-à-dire les femmes enceintes, les jeunes enfants, les aînés, tous ceux qui ont des maladies chroniques, en particulier des maladies respiratoires, doivent faire beaucoup attention, porter un masque si les gens le souhaitent, s'informer de comment la situation évolue en ayant accès aux informations locales et s'assurer que, quand c'est possible, de se protéger en restant à l'intérieur, éviter les sorties extérieures et si on a besoin de le faire, bien faire en sorte que ce soit court et le moins exigeant possible. Alors, in English, I would say that the situation is obviously critical because of forest fires across Canada that had an impact on the safety of communities, but also on the quality of air. The situation is particularly critical for pregnant women, young children, seniors, those living with respiratory diseases and chronic conditions. So the advice is to wear a mask if people want to do that. That can protect against the inhalation of particles. Also to avoid going outside if that is possible, and if it's needed, then to do it quickly and without strenuous effort, and to be mindful of local evidence regarding the quality of air.
On drug prices, could you comment on those documents that were tabled at the Health Committee last week? They were saying that the review body was trying to meet with you and you just wouldn't take the meeting.
Well, I have already gone to the meeting. I'm obviously following the situation very closely. The main message is the same. We've put into place on July the 1st important regulations that will increase affordability and accessibility to drugs and patented drugs in particular in Canada. We're moving forward because we know it's the right thing to do. The drug prices in Canada are too high compared to most other comparable countries, and we want those drug prices to go down.
How do you respond to the criticism, though, that some people thought you acted inappropriately on this file?
My first obligation is to respect the independence of the board. This is a board that needs to do its job independently of any sort of political pressure. That's my first priority. And my second priority, as I said, is to make sure that the implementation of those regulations that were put into place on July the 1st is made in the most efficient and appropriate manner.
Thank you.
Monsieur Champagne, pouvez-vous venir en
well, listen, negotiate. The question was around Stellantis.
How would you characterize the offer? That's the question.
Well, it's part of negotiation. Like I said, we are. I think we have made significant progress. We're getting to the end of that. And like I said, my job has always been to get the best possible deal for the workers, for the industry, and for Canada.
And I think is it a final offer, or is it as far as you'll go? Or are you prepared? You're describing it as a negotiation, so that suggests you're prepared to ante up more.
Well, it would not be smart for me to negotiate in public. These things are complex. You've seen it played a bit in the media. What matters is that we're making progress, and like I said, I think we're getting to the end of it. We're very confident about that, and my job is to make sure I get the best possible deal, and that's the nature of what we're doing with them, but would not be very smart. I saw comments from the company this morning. I think they acknowledge progress is being made, and that's what we need to do because that's an important...
They're doing a legal and financial analysis of your offer, and I'm trying to understand, is that your final offer?
Well, that is something between me and the company. As lead negotiator on that, you want to make sure that, there's discussions on both ways on that, but I think they understand that now we need to bring that to an end, to bring more certainty to the workers, to the industry. I know a number of people have been, following that in the last few days, and I just want to reassure everyone. Those are very normal negotiations. This is my daily life. So I would say,
an answer from Stellantis?
I would say shortly. They have what they need, and therefore I think that should be very short now as we're moving into the last phase.
Do you think Canadians will be able to stomach the offer? I mean, there was already eyebrows raised at $13 billion figure on Volkswagen. Are Canadians going to be able to stomach the number?
Well, I think you know, first of all, there should be no surprise. I mean, we said that in the fall economic statement that would be, you know, leveling the playing field with the United States when it comes to the IRA. But I think also Canadians and the unions and people understand that those are generational opportunities. You know, these large manufacturing facilities, most of them will be decided between the next 6 to 12 months in North America at least. So therefore, either you win now or you'll be out of that industry for 50 years or until there's a new technology. My mission has been, let's seize the moment, let's be ambitious, because you're building the future. You know, and when you look at the return on the economy with these investments, they are something that we have rarely seen in Canada's history. You're talking about massive, if I talk about Volkswagen, it's going to be the largest industrial site in Canada ever. So we're talking about massive things that we have never almost seen in Canada. But what I think is inspiring is that we're winning. And that's the point. We're winning. We're in the big leagues. We land these mandates. Stellantis will get done. Volkswagen has been done. And others are looking. So it's creating also momentum for all sorts of investments to come to Canada.
But what happens to the idea that resources are finite, federal resources are finite? You're seeming to suggest that the government's willing to throw as much at
no, what I'm saying.
As it takes to land the deal.
Oh, no. It's very, you know, the formula is very clear, and we've said it. What I'm saying is that there's not just the battery. My mission is to build the whole ecosystem for the economy of the 21st century. And a number of these other investments don't require IRA support. IRA support is very specific when it comes to batteries, when it comes to module. What I'm saying is that what we're trying is to, like Bloomberg put, we're ranked second in the world now for the battery ecosystem. We've done it with biomanufacturing. I'm doing it after that with semiconductor. We're doing it now with batteries and EV. You know, this is about building the industrial landscape of Canada for the 21st century. That's why I'm so confident. And I can tell you, the moment we announce these investments, other investors are looking to complement the ecosystem, which don't need the IRA-like support. That's why I said we've been very specific. We said it would be targeted, specific, and will engage only with a very, very few number of companies. That's what we did with Volkswagen. That's what we're doing with Stellantis. And you know, it's going to be very few companies with whom we can. We'll see that. Ben, définitivement, moi je pense que c'est le genre d'investissement qu'on appelle générationnel. C'est-à-dire que ce qu'il faut comprendre, c'est qu'en Amérique du Nord, les grandes usines de batteries vont se décider dans les 6 à 12 prochains mois. Et l'important pour moi, c'est de positionner le Québec, le Canada, de façon compétitive dans cet environnement-là, parce qu'on est en train de bâtir, je veux dire, le tissu industriel du 21e siècle. On l'a fait dans la biofabrication, on veut le faire avec les semi-conducteurs, dans le domaine Bromont avec Albany. Là, on le fait dans le domaine des batteries. Et moi, je pense que c'est le genre d'investissement. Vous savez, si on ne saisit pas l'opportunité maintenant, ce genre d'investissement-là, ça ne revient pas pour les 30, 50 prochaines années jusqu'à temps qu'il y ait une nouvelle technologie. Alors, on a les chiffres qui disent que, moi, je vous dirais, c'est un bon investissement. Puis le retour sur l'investissement, si vous regardez seulement Volkswagen, on parle de 200-400 milliards dans l'économie canadienne. Un budget pré-pandémique, c'est 300 milliards. C'est énorme. On n'a jamais vu ça, là. Ça, c'est des choses historiques dans l'histoire du Canada. On est capable d'attirer des grands joueurs comme ça. On est dans les lignes majeures. On attire des investissements. C'est pour ça que moi, j'ai dit, on est en train de façonner non seulement l'économie d'aujourd'hui, mais les emplois de demain. Ça progresse. Mais comme je vous dis, pour moi, c'est normal. Je fais ça tous les jours, des négociations. Alors, je parle avec plein de gens. Des gens, vous savez, des négociations comme ça, c'est complexe, c'est difficile parfois. Mais l'important pour moi, c'est d'arriver avec le bon accord pour les travailleurs, les travailleuses, pour l'industrie, mais aussi pour le Canada. Donc, c'est ça que je fais. Puis, comme je vous dis, c'est important parce que c'est un catalyste pour attirer d'autres investissements aussi qui vont venir chez nous.
Is there a deadline for these talks, or is it going to go on ad infinitum?
Well, I mean, you know, I don't think anyone is putting any artificial deadline, but I think now we are coming to the end of it. And like I said, I want to reassure Canadians that that's our daily lives. We have negotiation with people who want to invest in Canada every day. So that's why I say to everyone, let's take a deep breath. It's negotiation. We're going to get to something. I'm very confident. And my job is to get a good deal for Canada and the workers and the industry.
What is making your negotiations more difficult with
No. No, because it's clear. You know, what you need to understand, there was some sentiment that because of Volkswagen, something like that happened. I started talking to Stellantis before Volkswagen, and I'm talking to others at the same time. For me, it's like a radar screen. I talk to people every day who want to do things in Canada. So sometimes one would go faster, one would think a bit more time, want to look at something. But for me, it's just like a normal day in the life of a Minister of Industry in the 21st century in Canada. People want to come because we have the talent.
Is that a normal way for people to negotiate with the government, though, shut down plants and try and force you to
I would say no.
Of offering more money?
I would say no. Well, it's not because they shut it, we put more money for sure. That's just negotiation. Others have been doing things, you know. It's just because people don't see. This is the back office that people have seen. But that's things that happen every day where people say, we'll do this, we do that. But what I'm saying is that people come here because we have the talent. And that's why I'm always grateful to the workers, because if we didn't have the talent, people recognize that the plants in Canada are some of the most productive in the world. We have the very strong ecosystem. People understand that, you know, Canada is part of this ecosystem of manufacturing cars in the world. Thirdly, we have the critical mineral, and proximity is everything to resources, market, and assembly line. Renewable energy. You know, we're moving from electric car to a green car. And finally, I would say access to market. We're the only G7 country with a free trade agreement with all the other G7. So when you build these factories, you need to import a lot of machinery. So that makes it very competitive. So the point I'm saying is that Canada is very competitive. We never win on the money. We never win on the money. We win on talent. We win on critical minerals. We win on making sure that we have renewable energy to build a car of the future, which is going to be green, not only electric, but green. So we'll have green steel, green aluminum, green batteries. That's why we win.
Broadly, how far did you go? Did you offer Stellantis what they were asking?
Listen, this is negotiation. I don't think that you get to that point. What I'm saying is that, you know, it's negotiation on both sides, and I think what we said is largely in line with what people have seen and what we said in the fall economic statement. And therefore, that's why I'm confident that, you know, we'll be able to come to an end shortly on that. Merci tout le monde. À tantôt. Merci.
Thank you. MP Hendon, what is the process to determine if he'll return to Liberal caucus, and have you made a decision yet?
So I haven't made the decision. The Prime Minister and I talked about Mr. Dong's circumstance last week. I'm reviewing information that's available to the government, and I'll be working on that in the coming weeks and have more to say when I've had a chance to review the information and talk to the Prime Minister.
Have you spoken to Mr. Dong directly yet, and what has he told you?
I spoke to Mr. Dong at one point last week, and we agreed that we would speak again in a number of weeks.
And what exactly do you have, like, what are the steps of this review? What does it entail to make this determination?
So, again, I haven't come to those final decisions. The Prime Minister and I spoke about this last week. I had a brief conversation with Mr. Dong. The Prime Minister mentioned to the caucus last week that I would be working on a process with Mr. Dong to decide when, if, and how he returns to caucus, and that's the process that I'll be elaborating internally within the government and at the right moment with Mr. Dong over the number of weeks.
Under the Prime Minister's leadership, has an MP that's ever left caucus ever returned? How rare is this?
I'd have to. It's not a long list, of course, Ashley. I can't imagine there'd be a fulsome list in that regard. I'd have to look at the list, and we could go. No individual case is like the other. These are not related circumstances, one after the other. There are specific allegations against Mr. Dong that David Johnston said were not borne out by the facts and were distorted. The other cases can stand on their own merits.
And just lastly, when do you expect to have a decision? What kind of time frame?
I haven't set a time frame for myself in any way. I'll take the time that's necessary to have a thoughtful process, and then at one point, when that time is right, I presume I'll have a conversation again with the Prime Minister.
Mr. Johnston's report also said there were irregularities, though, in regards to what was going on in terms of Mr. Hendon's campaign. What has your government done to fix those irregularities to ensure that doesn't happen again? Is that happening? Is that part of your process?
So that's a very good question, and I have an extraordinary colleague who's the Minister of Public Security. He's doing a phenomenal job. I think he may be seconds away from coming here. And he could tell you in considerable detail about the great work that he's done in giving direction to the security and intelligence agencies to better share with the appropriate ministers information with respect to parliamentarians and ensure that parliamentarians themselves are given access to the appropriate tools to better prepare themselves to resist these attempts of foreign interference. With respect to Mr. Dong, and again, I will go from what Mr. Johnston made public in his first report. I'm paraphrasing because I don't have the report physically with me, although of course I've read it. Mr. Johnston confirmed what we were also told, is that the public reporting with respect to that particular allegation was not accurate. That's a challenge with people illegally leaking intelligence information from the security agencies and it getting reported in a way, as Deputy Minister Morrison and others explained a number of times, sometimes doesn't have the full context, sometimes doesn't have different components of the same story. So I'm not an intelligence analyst or expert. I take Mr. Johnston's conclusion on its face that that particular reporting was not accurate. So that's a starting point for my work around Mr. Dong and the Liberal caucus. But obviously, I'll want to get all of the available information from all of the intelligence agencies around these circumstances, and then I'll be in a position to have a conversation.
On the ethics commissioner, Mr. Dion left in February, now June. How long is it going to take for PCO to replace that job?
As you know, I had nothing to do with the process around Mr. Dion's departure. That would be an excellent question to ask another outstanding colleague, the Government House Leader, Mark Holland. I'm sure could speak to that. Thank you. Thanks, Ashley.
Is that okay, Marco? Is that good? Thank you very much.
Is that good?
Thank you, Mr.
Was that a good
LeBlanc.
introduction?
It was. Thank you very much, Mr. LeBlanc.
The Conservatives say that you do have the power to reverse the Bernardo decision for him to go to a medium security facility, that you could issue an order in council, that you could issue, or a ministerial directive. Will you personally intervene and do that?
Well, first, there's very strong consensus that the decision to transfer Mr. Bernardo to a medium security institution is incomprehensible. It's inexplicable. And that was precisely why I took the opportunity to have a very frank discussion with Commissioner Kelly yesterday to express the concerns that I have in my capacity as Minister of Public Safety, as well as the families of Leslie Mahaffey and Kristen French, as well as Canadians. Now, I would say two things in response to your question. First, this is a decision that was taken operationally independent from the elected government. So these decisions around transferring inmates are ones that are undertaken by the Correctional Services of Canada. Second, despite that fact, as a result of the conversation that I had yesterday, Commissioner Kelly said that she will be looking very closely and carefully at the decision to transfer Mr. Bernardo, and it is my expectation that she will be getting back to me in the very short term.
Have you seen the reasons for a preliminary report as to why that transfer was made? Have you asked to see it?
We do have access to those reasons. As I explained yesterday, it is important to underline that under the law, for both security reasons as well as privacy reasons, it will be up to the Correctional Services of Canada to explain those reasons. I do believe that given the fact that this matter is now public, that Canadians are entitled to an explanation because it has been a very, very difficult moment, not only generally for the public, but in particular for the families of Leslie Mahaffey and Kristen French. As I said yesterday, I can recall being a student, living in Toronto, the reporting of these horrific crimes, which were visited upon women and young girls. They're absolutely repugnant. They're the most grave and serious offenses that can be committed. And as a result, there needs to be some explanation of this.
How long do you think that review could take into the transfer, Bernardo's transfer? And as well, at what point are you open to issuing an order in council or a ministerial directive overturning it?
I expect that the review will not take long. I don't think we're talking a very long period of time, a couple of weeks. That would be my expectation at the most. And secondly, look, if there are issues with regards to policies, with regards to the principles, even with regards to legislation, I'm going to leave all of those options on the table. What needs to be underlined is that victims' rights are taken into proper account in these decisions around the most egregious offenders, violent offenders, repeat offenders, before they are moved from maximum to medium. And I'm not satisfied that from what I have seen in this decision, that victims' rights were properly weighed into the mix. Canadians are expressing those concerns. And so there does need to be an accounting, there does need to be a justification for the decision, and we'll see where we are at in a couple of weeks' time, and after that, if we need to revisit the legislation or any other policies or directions, then we'll do that. Thanks very much.
Doug Ford said the commissioner should resign. Doug Ford said the commissioner should resign.
You have some concerns in regards to the TikTok videos, some I guess, concerns about how people are handling Pride protests in Atlantic Canada. What's going on?
I don't know. I'm at a loss. There are some who seem to think that if you celebrate diversity, you celebrate pride, that is some sort of ideology or indoctrination, which I find baffling. What we're saying to kids is, be free to be who you are, celebrate it, be free to be, to love who you choose. I wish I'd had that when I was younger. It would have made life a lot easier knowing that the world was accepting of who I am. I find it exceedingly frustrating that people would politicize this. This is actually the default. This is the way it should be. Kids get it innately. Just celebrate those differences, make them feel comfortable and welcoming. This is real, and just to infer that somehow this is some sort of act of political ideology, this is freedom. I know there are certain quarters who don't like what freedom looks like all the time, but this is freedom, and these kids get it. Just leave them alone.
There seems to be a trend across the U.S. and now here in Canada in regards to these protests that have cropped up in terms of not just protesting against Pride, LGBTQ rights, but also the transgender issues, as well as this whole issue of even the story time. What concerns you about that? Is it a pattern that you are disturbed by?
Yeah, that's why we we announced $1.5 million for security yesterday. That's with a heavy heart that you do that, but that's real, That's Pride organizations coming to us saying that we are concerned now. These aren't, letters to the school board. These are threats to people's safety. That's shocking to me. That's shocking. I mean, I am still very much a glass half full kind of guy on this, because in my lifetime, I can't believe I'm married 13 years. I still think that we live in the best time in the best country where we can be free to just love who we choose, to be who we are, but you gotta fight this stuff back. You gotta fight it. You have to be vigilant. People who worked to allow me to have these rights and to be happy were vigilant. So my responsibility now is to maintain that vigilance.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Minister, I was just asking, well, that $1.5 million, it's going towards security for Pride organizations. Do you think that should be an annual occurrence? Do you think that we'll need this moving forward as we're seeing the rise in hate?
God, I hope not. I hope we never need it again.
And are you concerned at all? I mean, a few years ago, Pride participants said they didn't really want police involvement. Are you concerned that this investment in security might have increased presence? Is that going to be difficult for the community?
I don't know. I mean, I think, the communities themselves came to us, and I think Minister Ian and Minister Mendicino moved very quickly to get this sum of money at least. I mean, it's the quantum sum, but it's also the symbolism. This is real, we got to take it on. Thanks.